Hey, Rich, how are you?
Doing well, Davin. How are you?
I am absolutely fantastic. I'm excited to have you here today and joining us on the Finding Purpose LiveCast. Man, I know we're going to have a great conversation together. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule.
And here we are in Southeast Michigan, and the sun is shining.
Imagine that in March, nonetheless.
Exactly.
It's amazing, amazing. And for those of you tuning in to us from wherever you're at, whether you're in Michigan or wherever you're at across the country, across the world, today, we have the privilege of spending time with Rich Sheridan, who is the author of Joy Inc., also the author of Chief Joy Officer and the co-founder and CEO of Menlo Innovations. And you may have heard of Menlo. Thousands of people from across the world come to Menlo just to see the incredible culture of what the Menlonians have built there through joy and purpose. And so, Rich, without further ado, if you could, please share with us kind of this journey of joy and purpose. What led you to write 2 books about joy and led you to lead a culture based on joy that thousands of people come across the world to visit at Menlo.
You know, Davin, the fun thing for me is you're sitting in the town where this all began for me, Mount Clemens, Michigan. I'm a pure Michigan kid. I grew up in Mount Clemens. I went to Chippewa Valley High School there, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. In 1971, Macomb County Schools started offering computer science curriculum to high school kids. And I happened to be a freshman that year. I signed up. I didn't even know what I was signing up for. I touched a computer in this classroom and it clacked out on a roll of paper because that's the way they used to work in those days. And it said, "Hi, Rich," because that's what I told it to do. And I thought, man, this is going to be the coolest thing ever. You know, I was at that point, I'm 13 years old, and I've been watching Star Trek and just so excited about the future and seeing technology playing a role in it. My dad worked at the General Motors Tech Center, and he would bring me in for open houses, and I'd see the future of technology at the Tech Center. And all of these things just like spark the imagination of a 13-year-old. And I chose a career right then and there. And I knew what I was going to do the rest of my days. And I'm 63 now, so it's almost exactly 50 years later. And I'm still in the software business, which my kids are they look at me like, "Really, Dad, you chose at 13 what you're going to do the rest of your days." And the delightful thing is that, I got a lot of opportunities along the way. I eventually went to the University of Michigan, got a couple of degrees in computer science and computer engineering, and launched a career that, quite frankly, looked perfect. Every way the world measures his success, I had it. Job, title, authority, stock options, paycheck, greater responsibilities every year and all that. And yet by my mid-30s, I wanted out. I didn't want to even be in the profession anymore, even though the world was telling me I was doing a great job. And, what I was experiencing was what a lot of people in at least my industry, probably most experienced in their careers, was this chaos to bureaucracy cycle back and forth, either a land of never getting anything done or a land of never getting anything started because you were waiting for some approval process or something, and sometimes operating in chaos and bureaucracy simultaneously. And it wasn't fulfilling. I wasn't seeing the fruit of my labors get out into the world and delight the people it was intended to serve. And I was literally contemplating getting out of the profession entirely. And yet, every night I'd come home to my wife, my 3 lovely little girls, and our house and our cars, and that mantle of responsibility was on my shoulders. And I thought, well, what else are you going to do? I mean, what if not this? What? This is what you're trained in. This is what you're good at, even though I wasn't producing the results I thought I should. And so in that moment, I chose to, as I say, my inner optimist kicked in. I was in a room full of manure, and I was going to keep digging because I knew there was a pony in this room somewhere. And So the journey out led me to authors and books. And I'll bet, all those books in your shelves, we probably have some common authors between us. Books like Tom Peters' book, In Search of Excellence, Peter Drucker's books on management, Peter Sengi's book, The Fifth Discipline, on the art and practice of building a learning organization. All of these books kept telling me there was a better way of doing things than I was experiencing, but they kind of left it as an exercise to me to figure out. And so I kept reading, I kept getting inspired by authors, but there was no plan. There was no concrete steps I could take, but that was okay. I at least was kind of, healing my wounds just from being inspired by, okay, change is possible. There is a better way of doing things. But eventually I became a VP of a company here in Ann Arbor called Interface Systems. And I read a book and I saw a video, and that literally became a click moment for me. As they say, fortunes. And suddenly in 1999, I knew exactly where I was going. I knew how I was going to get there. And over 2 years, I transformed a tired old public company to something that looks a lot like Menlo does today. And then it was all taken away from me in an instant. 2001, the internet bubble burst, all gone. The paycheck, the stock options went to zero. The office was gone. And I went home and told my wife, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes. She said, "You're unemployed?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now." And that was the start of Menlo, because while they could take all the other stuff away from me, they couldn't take away what I'd learned in those 2 years. And what I learned was there's a completely different model for how we approach management, teamwork, how we lead people. And that's been my journey ever since. I'm delighted to say that joy has been back for me for the last 20 years. And we have accomplished what I wanted to do from the early days, and that is delight the people we intend to serve. That is in our view of the world, that kind of purpose, externally focused to delight people you intend to serve with the work of your heart, your hands, your mind. That's where I derive my joy from.
So good. So good. And it seems, especially in the software industry, I know particularly in your book, Joy Inc., you talk about, this phrase, and it gets people attention, right? Ending human suffering in the software industry. And I know that you'll share about where you got that from, but it just seems like, software is so rigid, so processed. So, you think of extroverts and introverts, so introverted, and joy is such an expressive, extroverted word that breathes. It's like, how do these two things possibly interface with each other, to use a term from your industry? Share with us kind of what that means. What does ending human suffering in software means, and how does joy and creating joy in through serving others work with software?
Yeah, all of that pain and suffering, because my kids ask me this, they're like, "Dad, we want to be where you are in your job." I say, okay, let's walk through the 15 years of pain and suffering that I had, because that was formative for me. I'm not saying you have to go through pain in order to get to a good spot, but pain can be a good teacher. And there were three kinds of pain I saw throughout that sort of 15-year journey, that what I call my trough of disillusionment days. There was the pain for the people who pay for software to be built, the sponsors of software projects who they might have some idea in their mind, like, we need a piece of software to solve this problem for our company. Awesome. So you got to go find people who can do that for you. You can't, typically, most people can't do it for themselves. They don't have the skills. They don't have the background. They don't have the capabilities to write software. So they have to go hire a team to do it. And at the beginning of every project, it's kind of all the same. Everybody's like, yay, a new project. It's exciting. It's greenfield. We got a blank piece of paper. We can do whatever we want. And software kind of holds this great promise of things will be so much better because we've automated them. We've made them faster. We've made them more complete or something. But traditionally, and it's stunning, I think most people are unfamiliar with this if you're not in the industry, more projects in the software industry fail than succeed. And I mean, when I say fail, I mean like fail to deliver any results at all. tens of billions of dollars a year are spent on software projects that get canceled, never see the light of day. And that is utter suffering for the people who pay for software to be built, because they have no control over it, it would seem, right? They spend money, and, it's sometimes, the team's like, well, we thought it was this big and now it's like this big. And they're like, okay, then we'll spend some more. We thought it was this big and now it's this big. Okay, we'll spend some more. And eventually executive patience runs out and they cancel the project. And that's tremendous amount of business suffering, right? There's probably a guy you and I know in common who runs a manufacturing company nearby where you are. And he said, Rich, we've been trying to build an ERP system inside of our company. We've gone around the mountain twice on this. We've spent $2 million each time. We have nothing to show for it. Well, for their little company, $4 million is a big deal. So number one, end human suffering for the people who pay for software to be built. And that requires a different relational model between the technical team and the business team. And that's one of the things we work on. Second is for the people who actually do the work. My industry is one of death march culture. When the Affordable Care Act was passed and there was going to be this new website called healthcare.gov, when it launched, it was a complete disaster. And the president of the United States came before the nation and said, don't worry. We have people working 24/7 to get it back in shape. Well, I will tell you, I believe the term 24/7 actually came out of the software industry. This was a work model. You think all the work that's been done over the decades with unions working for 40-hour work weeks. Let me tell you, my industry went exactly the opposite direction. And when somebody says they're working 24/7, that doesn't mean we're working 3 shifts. No, it's the same people. Mountain Dew and pizza boxes, and they're tired people. And I will tell you, tired people make bad software. And so the suffering of the people who do the work, and let me tell you, if the project eventually gets canceled and people are like, well, then why did I abandon my family for 3 years? Yeah. Why did I break all the personal relationships I have in my life for the project just to be canceled? So that was number 2. And then the third one is the one really where our hearts are at Menlo, because we've actually solved the other 2 really well. The third one is delighting the people we intend to serve. And those are the end users of the software. And I think this is the part where people, once I increase their self-awareness about this, they're like, oh my gosh, he's right. It's everywhere. This is the number of times any one of us, including me, who's in the industry, has degrees in computer science, get frustrated with technology because it doesn't work the way we would expect it to, right? I mean, I've been hearing these stories just now about how difficult it is to register for COVID vaccine shots on websites of major corporations. Like, really? How hard can this be? Why do we screw this up so bad? And we are the industry that learned to call the people we serve stupid users. And then we write dummies books for those poor people. Like, what other industry can get away with it? Oh, they're just stupid users. Like, these are the people who are using your work.
Right.
And so for us, we wanted to end those 3 kinds of suffering: the people who pay for software, the people who build it, and the people who end up using it every day. And the word we chose to center all of this around is joy. And it's a fun story of how I got to that word, but it's been in our vocabulary for a long time. We believe there is joy and delight in serving others. And for us, it is those end users of the software who one day come back and say, I love what you created. Thank you. You made my life better. This is so much easier to use. It thinks like I do. Most computer programmers, they call them stupid users. Like, well, as soon as you learn to think like me, this will all make sense. Like, why do I have to think like you? Why can't you make your software think like me? And that's really what we're all about at Menlo.
So good. I love the others focused mentality of that. And you think, you brought back, and we'll connect joy and purpose here in a second, because everything that people are probably like, wait a minute, how does this all connect to purpose? And one of the things that you always talk about is the thrust of purpose, which we'll get to. But you reminded me of, something I've shared multiple times, which is every company, every idea starts with this idea of, hey, we're going to go do this. Here's this need that we can meet, right? Here's this purpose that we're going to go serve. And we invite people to come along that journey and be like, hey, come with us to do this. And then we put processes in place to support the people to achieve the purpose. And then we start measuring performance and profitability. And all too often in companies, there's this mission drift where we start to shift and focus more on bottom line, profitability, performance, processes. And we forget that we invited people to be a part of this, and that they, as you just said, are giving up so much of their time, so much of their lives, times away from their families, relationships, all of these things to support a purpose that might just be canceled. I mean, it's just so, the way that you share that, I could think of so many people personally who that story has come true to time and time again in their careers. And so what I love about what you just shared is, at the end of the day, there's a friend of mine, Scott McGregor. He was actually on the LiveCast a few weeks ago, and he's got this, saying people over everything, people over everything. And your focus, right, in ending human suffering is, okay, how is what we are doing impacting the people that are paying for it? How is it impacting the people that are making it? And how is it impacting the people that are using it? And the word that you're using to measure that impact is joy. Right. That's almost kind of like your number one KPI is, what is our joy level on this project?
Right. Yep.
So how did you arrive at that? You were going to say why you chose joy.
Yeah. It's funny. It was one of those, it was actually inspired by Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Mm. And people had heard me speak for years. I've done keynotes. It was kind of the whole time Menlo's been in existence, speaking on many of these topics. And somebody saw Sinek's video and they said, Rich, you do this. Mm-hmm. You start with why when you talk about it. And I thought about it. I'm like, no, I really don't. If somebody came to visit Menlo, I'd say, hey, we're a software design and development firm. That's what we do. We have this unusual way of working that produces better results. Let me show you how we do it. But I think the gentleman who wrote this to me was inferring the why because of the enthusiasm, because of the energy, because of the results we produced. But I'd never actually did what Sinek implored us to do. And that was, no, start with your why. And I thought, well, what would I say? We get thousands of people who visit us every year. And I lead a lot of the tours. So I have a lot of opportunities to practice kind of a start with why talk. And here was the day. This was the day I decided I was going to do it. And I wondered, what am I going to say? What will be the first words out of my mouth? Because I'm not going to start with what we do. And I'm looking at our mission statement, which says end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's our why. We're going to end human suffering. I want everybody who comes to Menlo to walk out the door with one word on their mind, and it's suffering. No, I don't want that, right? But right down at the bottom of our mission statement, kind of waiting there like a gift for me. And we'd written this years before, maybe a decade before. It said our goal since our founding in 2001 is to return joy to one of the most unique endeavors mankind has ever undertaken, the invention of software. And it was like, thank you. So this group comes in and I said, welcome to Menlo. You've come to a place that has very intentionally created a culture focused on the business value of joy. And they all looked at me like, what on earth are you talking about? Rich, we're learning, you're a software design development firm. You have these weird methods. We want to learn about them. Why are you talking about joy? And I said, well, okay, pretend with me for a second. Pretend you came here because you had an idea and you wanted it turned into software. And we're going to have that group of people back there build it for you. And pretend for some odd cultural reason, when we go back to that room of people, the right half has joy and the left half doesn't. Which half would you want working on your project? And they said, well, we want the joyful half, of course. I said, why? What difference would it make? Why would you care? And they said, well, they produce better outcomes. They care more about the outcomes. They'd be easier to work with. And they just like rattled off like 12 things. I said, awesome. So you're with me. There is, in fact, tangible business value to joy. I said, now I'm going to go show you how we do what we do. And you can stop me anywhere along the way and say, that thing you just described, can you draw a line back to joy? And I told them, I said, I can draw a short, straight line back to joy. And so that's where it all began for me. And this was probably now 10 years ago. And then it led to different kinds of keynotes, books, and all that sort of thing. And it's been a delightful journey, but it was there all along.
It's been an amazing journey to be watching from a distance. And then as I've come to know you now over the last couple of years and reading your books and conversations that we've had, there's a lot of people that write about stuff. There's a lot of people that read about stuff. And then there are those that take, what they've read about and even what they've written about and translate that into a reality that could be a blueprint for so much transformational impact, which is exactly what you have done. You have another saying that comes out of your books that I love, which is run the experiment, run the experiment. And I get chills every time I even hear those words because I hear them in your voice. And I think there's so many companies that even right now, as they're listening to you and they're like, that all sounds great. Yes, we know that joy produces better work and all that, but we don't have time. We don't have money. We don't have resources. And maybe one day when we have time, money, resources and everything, we could afford all that fluffy stuff, right? Well, whatever, right?
Oh yeah.
But you challenge them.
Yep.
Run the experiment. And I could share some great examples where that has paid off, but I want to defer to you. Talk to us about, for those who are listening right now and might even still be a little skeptical after everything that you've shared, what run the experiment means.
At its simplest level, Davin, it means take action over take a meeting. Think how many times, and this will happen in the upcoming Purpose Summit, right? Because you have assembled just an incredible group of speakers who I can't wait to be in the audience for all the people you've brought in to speak. And we will all walk out of that 3 days with our minds abuzz with new ideas. And then what'll happen for most is they're going to go back to their office, maybe, or back to work from home. And they're going to run into somebody who wasn't at the summit. And they're going to be like, I have this great idea. And the person who hasn't heard what they've heard, hasn't seen what they've seen, will look at them and go, well, that won't work here. That's against policy. We tried that 10 years ago and didn't work then. It's not going to work now. And it. The idea dies right then and there. It just dies on the vine because you're busy. You got meetings to go to. You got emails to answer. And right there, squish, idea goes away. And I have done this for years now, and it's been amazing to watch the results. I arm people with the response when that happens. I tell them, I said, yep, look them in the eye and say, I get it. But why don't we try it before we defeat it? Let's run the experiment and see what happens. It's almost impossible to turn that down because you're like, well, yeah, of course, it's just an experiment. I mean, it might not work, but it was just an experiment. And then it falls into this really important category that drives our culture as well, which is make mistakes faster. If we make mistakes quickly, we can correct them while they're still small. Most organizations choose to make really big, slow mistakes that'll kill them once they discover it, right? Because my basic view of humanity is we're humans, we're going to make mistakes. So we have a choice. We can make little small ones and correct them while they're still small, or make really big, slow ones. We don't have a choice not to make mistakes. We are just going to make mistakes. So why don't we choose to make little ones quickly? And that's the essence of run the experiment.
So good. It kind of brings me back to what Maxwell said one time, right? Fail frequently, fail. What did he say? He said, fail frequently, and it ends with fail forward, but there's a middle one, and I forget what it is. It's fail frequently, fail often, fail forward, something along those lines. But so many people are afraid to fail. And so by the time that they realize the magnitude of their failure, it's often too late to turn.
And then, well, it's even worse than that. And you've seen this. I know you have. Once you realize you've made a big mistake, you don't wake up one day and say, we have to fix that. You're like, no, we have to hide that. We have to, we've spent too much money getting this far. And you kind of double down on the sunk cost mentality thinking that says, No, I know the Titanic sank to the bottom of the ocean, but let's keep rearranging the deck chairs. Let's send submarines down. We'll hoist the thing back up, even though it's broken in the middle. No, let's not make those big mistakes, because the fear, the anxiety, and quite frankly, the human toll that comes from making really big, slow mistakes is you probably don't have a chance to fix those big ones because you're gone. Your company went out of business, or they laid off your department or something like that. So, I mean, the consequences are steep for those big, slow mistakes.
Huge. And probably the biggest mistake, that one of the examples of those big ones, is quite frankly how they build and lead their culture as they grow. So as companies start to scale, that beginning feeling of joy and purpose and all of these things, as they start to put processes in place, as they start to do all those things, those things kind of end up in the rear view mirror rather than being in the windshield. And you have this great illustration. I don't want to take away from your keynote that you're going to do at the summit, but I love how you relate it to an airplane, and people will have to come hear you talk to get all of that. But for you, there's this thrust of purpose. Purpose is always right in front. What is pulling us forward? What are we moving towards? And one of the largest mistakes that we see companies do time and time and time and time again is no, purpose point was the starting point that we started with, but then we left and departed. And now we need to focus on growth and profitability and processes and all these things.
Yep. Success is the biggest inhibitor to change. Why should we change? We're successful. I don't know. Could it be that locomotive that's coming behind us called Amazon? It's like, no, they're lighting our way. Like, no, I don't think so. You better get off the tracks here pretty quick.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I remember I had a manager one time 20 years ago who was like, "Do you ever read the book Change or Die?" And I'm like, "No," and it doesn't sound like I want to, right? And he's like, "You need to read that book." But it's so true, right? We're afraid of change. And one of the things you mentioned, the Purpose Summit, and it was very, very, I'm excited about the team that is coming around that. And I can take, really no credit for assembling this. This has been obviously a force much greater than me that has brought all of these authors and thought leaders and speakers together for such a time as this. And one of them is Aaron Hurst, right? And he wrote about the purpose economy back in 2013. And there's been different economies, that we've walked through, and probably nothing has been a steeper change for organizations than transitioning to the purpose economy. And everything that you've done at Menlo, everything that you've written about in Joy Inc. and in Chief Joy Officer, everything you've talked about here for the last 30 minutes has been, almost prophetic towards the time that we're in now. And quite frankly, if it'll be the companies that adapt to this change, that infuse joy at the center of all that they do, that embrace this thrust of purpose and put people and purpose at the forefront of everything that they're doing, that will lead tomorrow. And the ones that don't will be on the train tracks getting run over by a train.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Awesome. So, as we come up on our time here, I know that there are some listening to this that are saying, this is all great, but they're still struggling. I know that people are going to, someone's going to walk out of this, they're going to go right into their 1:30 meeting or whatever it is they have next on their calendar. And they're, oh, that's fantastic. Great. What would you have to say to those watching this right now? And as we close here, if this was the last message that you were going to give to those who are looking to really, truly change their life individually, organizationally, as it relates to joy and purpose, what would you have to say to them?
Yeah, I love this quote from John Naisbitt. I use it in a lot of my talks. It's the greatest advancements that are going to occur in the century we're in now are not going to occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human. And that first has to be a self-reflection. When I give talks, I see people leaning over saying, I wish my boss was here to hear what this guy's saying. No, I'm going to point at you. You need to change. I needed to change. I had to become a different kind of leader. There's a lot of talk these days about the worries of, is AI going to replace us? Are we going to be outmoded by machine learning and robotics and all that sort of thing? There are only 4 talents left that are going to move our organizations forward: creativity, imagination, innovation, and invention. Those are the most human activities. And we have to figure out for ourselves and for our organizations and the teams we lead, how do we keep each of our team members and ourselves in that most human place? And there are some simple formulas to do that. But the old model, the old way of doing things, the purpose-driven ways of the past, which were the reason for a corporation is to maximize shareholder value, does not produce those four things. And we've been reminded of that so many times, and seeing the counter examples to it today. So, change or die. You probably won't die, but the organization you're part of might. They might kill a career or something like that, and you'll wonder what the heck happened.
So good. So good. There's people that make it happen. There's people that watch it happen. And there's people that say what happened. And thank you so much for being someone who has been truly making this happen for, more than 10 years and longer, and for transforming the entire industry and giving us a great blueprint of what joy looks like on an individual organizational level, and how purpose drives all of that, and just the embodiment of who you are and all that you've done in creating your tribe of Melonians, and the impact on those who work there and those that you serve. It's been amazing to watch. So, and you're in growth stage, right? You're in growth stage. Menlo is growing.
Yes.
So if you're listening to this and you've ever wanted to work in an amazing, unbelievable place, you need to check out Menlo Innovations. Now is the time. And we'll look forward to seeing you, Rich, at the Purpose Summit, May 11th through the 13th. That's going to be an amazing time. I can't wait for people to hear your talk, and to take those things and not just go back and say, oh, that was great, but to actually apply them to their lives and to their organization. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Devin.
So for those of you listening today, again, we had the opportunity to sit down with Rich Sheridan, the author of Joy Inc., the author of Chief Joy Officer, and the co-founder and CEO of Menlo Innovations. I implore you to follow him on LinkedIn, check out his books, check out his work, check out Menlo. They give tours all the time of their incredible culture and what they've done in the software industry, and how they're transforming relationships with clients, relationships with their employees, and relationships with those using the software for the betterment of humanity. Tune in next time on the Finding Purpose LiveCast.